National Black Women's Equal Pay Day was celebrated a short while ago, but each and every day we need to shed light on this topic as income disparity remains a massive issue. Joining me now is Ebony Coleman, CEO and founder of Destination Tomorrow, to talk more about equal pay and uplifting Black trans women. Hi, Sean. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. I would love to start by asking you to give a little bit of your background working with Destination Tomorrow and just a little bit of your background around this kind of activism.
Sure. My name's Ebony Coleman. I am the founder and CEO at Destination Tomorrow. We are a direct service organization that provides economic empowerment for our community, right? That's the root of what it is that we wanted to do for Black and Brown LGBTQ community members with an emphasis on the trans community. So we do things like GED, job readiness, professional development, life skills, financial literacy, but we're also guided by what community tells us is most needed. And for the last couple of years, it's been housing as well as food insecurity or dealing with food insecurity. We've also expanded. As I said, housing is one of the things that a few people, most of the population, have discussed as one of the pressing needs. And so we've opened some housing units as well, with a focus on those who identify as trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary.
Mhm. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. So we heard about you in regard to National Black Women's Equal Pay Day, and there's a lot of talk about income disparity between the genders, men and women, and then there's disparity between white women and Black women, women of color, and then of course, then you take that one more step. The more marginalized you go, the bigger the disparity. So I wonder if you would talk a little bit more about how that plays out and how that affects these, especially Black trans women.
Yeah, the sad thing is there's so many layers to disparity, right?
Yeah.
But when we look at Black and Brown trans women, the first thing you have to understand is the life expectancy of a Black trans woman historically has been about 35 to 37 years old. In addition, the average income has been about $10,000 to $15,000. So when you start to look at these things, you can understand where that disparity comes in, right? One of the things that we address is the lack of resources for the trans community, and that also plays a part in their ability to receive career to come into a career market where they're making a living wage. So one of the things that we are looking at DT is to make sure that we're leveling the playing field and getting folks employment at a level that they're going to be able to sustain housing and sustain their lifestyle. But I think the reason that I was really, really excited about having this call is we don't normally talk about those disparities that exist amongst trans women and cisgender women, and the reason that we should be bridging that gap, right? That they have so much more in common than apart, and the strength that they would have if they would speak about not just the disparities as far as equal pay, but housing and voting and reproductive rights and all of those things that they should be discussing together and formulating a plan to kind of push back on. And I'm hopeful that this is the beginning of some conversations amongst those populations.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And I wonder, you said you were working toward resources, and would you give a little kind of explanation of how you're doing that or what's being done to help bridge those gaps?
So some of the resources first. The job readiness program it has an emphasis on those folks that identify as trans or gender nonconforming, non-binary. So overwhelmingly trans women,
Yeah.
and feminine presenting folks. The biggest project we have right now is called a Switch Housing, and Switch is a temporary housing 90-day program for trans and gender nonconforming folks who are former or current sex workers in 25 years or over. And what we wanted to do is, one, honor the fact that sex work is real work, right? But give folks an opportunity to be able to build a nest egg. So when we're saying about sustainable housing, they have the opportunity to save money. So they stay with us for 90 days. They save 30% of whatever income they have coming in, and we work with them to find more appropriate permanent housing. It's a model that can be successful if given the proper resources and services from elected officials. But that's just one way, right? The other thing that we had to do was partner with workforce development so that we can find employment for those folks that decided that sex work wasn't paying enough or they didn't want to do it any longer, that they can transition into other employment opportunities or career opportunities. And then lastly, we have a free GED program, but the GED program goes way beyond just GED. It's academic enrichment as a whole. So figuring out if they want to continue their education, and if so, getting them into spaces that they'll be able to actually learn and thrive.
Wonderful. Thank you. And would you talk a little bit about the connection between stable housing and education and closing the pay gap?
Well, it's everything, right? If you've ever looked at one of the ads in an Indeed or Monster, you recognize that what jumps out immediately is having 15 or 10 years of experience and or MPH or BA. Or so if I don't have 15 years of experience because I've been kind of frozen out of the labor market because of my gender identity, and I haven't been able to get the education because I couldn't afford to go to school because I was trying to survive. Mm-hmm. You can see immediately how I'm automatically frozen out of these opportunities. So we want to kind of begin those discussions with employers, with colleges, with vocational schools, just to make sure that they understand that the trans population, the trans folks as a whole need these resources, and giving them language to begin to do marketing and messaging for our community.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And also, I wonder, what can folks do to help? Just, people from any walk of life, how can they help aid this community and uplift them?
I would say to educate yourself more about the community, right? At the end of the day, we're the same folks. We want stable housing. We want to earn a living wage. We want safety for our family. Those issues are the same issues within my community and within any other community. So I think the biggest thing we can do is learn about each other. But then we can also ask for more dialogue, which is why, again, I'm so happy that I get the opportunity to really, really discuss this. You don't normally see a Black trans man on any channel having discussions around disparities and how we can address them and what we're doing to address them. So having more engaged dialogue that's not about hate or being bitter to each other, or you're getting more than me, so I'm not going to give you any more help, but genuinely seeing each other as human and figuring out what we can do to help each other out.
Wonderful. I wonder too if you would also talk a little bit about, there's this surge of anti-LGBTQ plus legislation all over the country, and specifically targeted so much at trans folks, especially trans youth. And I wonder if you would address that a little bit and what needs to be done to stem this tide.
We need to show up, right? Too often we're reactive, and what we have to see is that this has been a long game. This strategy has been in place for a long time, targeting multiple communities, right? So it's not just that there's anti-trans legislation. It's also happening at the same time that there's anti-woman legislation, right? And reproductive rights and justice and voting rights, and all of these things are coming into play. It's a long game, and now we're being reactive to it, and we don't have the resources. We haven't organized as well. We didn't mobilize around what an effective response is going to be. So now we're playing catch up. And I think in playing catch up, we have to really get in the game. And what does that mean? That means that you should be contributing to local LGBT organizations. You should be volunteering with LGBT organizations. You should be speaking up and speaking out. If it goes against what your morals and values are, then you should be having a discussion around how it's impacting the community. I think those are the vital things that our voices need to be heard. But it can't just be members of the LGBT community. It has to be all of us, and all of us have to understand how it impacts the entire planet, and it impacts all of us. If they come after me, they're going to come after you later on. It's just a matter of time, right? Because it's a strategy that they have. So how do we work together to avoid that?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that. And I wanted to give you just an opportunity, if there's something else that you're working on, to speak about that.
Well, there are a few things. As you see, behind me is DT South. So we started in Bronx, New York, and we've just opened an office in Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm incredibly happy about that. But what we want to do is like implement the same models and the same strategies here in the South. We've recognized that, New York is it's like the blessing and the curse, because we receive an abundance amount of resources and funding and visibility. And our Southern community didn't necessarily receive the same. So we wanted to come down here and work with community members to figure out ways that we can implement some of the strategies we're implementing in New York that have been successful. We are also a grant maker. We work with the Transcend Community Impact Fund, which is funded by Gilead Science, and every year we get $1 million to re-gift to the trans community, those that are actually doing the work. We have a new contract, or new RFP, coming out in October. So if you follow Destination Tomorrow online, you'll be able to download that RFP. If you have anyone who's transgender, non-conforming, or non-binary that runs an organization or is an advocate, have them apply for these funds. That's what they're there for. We want to help build sustainable organizations and sustainable models nationally.
Great. Well, Sean, Ebony, Coleman, thank you so much for this discussion. I found it incredibly enlightening, and I hope others will as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you.